Hi everyone, this is Melissa from Local First Arizona. It's good to see everybody in here. I see that we're going to continue to add people as they kind of log into this webinar. I'm just going to go over a few things before I pass the presentation over to Quinn, who we're super excited to have here. But just as a reminder, whenever you join the webinar, you are automatically muted, and we do record this webinar, so make sure that you try to keep that on mute just to keep it as clean and nice as possible for the recording later and not to interrupt the presentation. If you have any questions or issues regarding tech or sound is not working, you can go ahead and drop those to me in the chat box. If you do not have that up, just go to the bottom of your screen, click on the chat, and that should open up on the side of your screen. And you can also ask Quinn any questions and drop them in there, and we can circle back to make sure that those get answered at the end of the presentation. And then I think that's just about it. I'm super excited about this one. I'm a huge fan of Instagram stories. I was talking to Quinn about that. Instagram is my favorite platform, so I'm really excited to see this one. So Quinn, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Local First and to all of you who have joined me for this Hump Day webinar. If you're here, let me know in the chat and drop an emoji. Tell me how you're feeling today. Is it the dancing emoji? Is it a smiley face with sunglasses? Let me know your mood. I'll actually pick one too and pop it in the chat. I'm feeling like, let's do sparkles. I'm feeling pretty energetic. It's midday. Had a good morning so far. So pop it in the chat if you're here. Let me know your emoji mood. Hi, Emma. So good to see you. She's got a wink. Great. Anyone else has a mood? Me. Coach Lisa did an 8-mile walk this morning. Wow. How early did you have to get up? It has been super hot today. I sat outside for about an hour and that was all I could do. 350. Oh man, you are way in a different league, Lisa. Jacqueline's feeling like a party. Jennifer's feeling excited for this presentation. Lisa, I agree. I think you should take a nap as well. I encourage you throughout this presentation, use the chat, have some fun, talk with each other. I've got it on my screen too, so I can see it. And I'll also be answering your questions more specific to the presentation at the end. I'll also be asking you a couple of questions throughout, so don't be shy. It's a great way for me to learn where you are with Instagram stories and to give you some personalized tips as we go along. So today we are talking about one of my favorite topics in both business and in life, Instagram. Specifically, we're going to be exploring the anatomy of engaging, strategic, thumb-stopping Instagram stories. Now, let me know in the chat how many of you have seen me present before, whether it's online or in person. Let me know where it was. Actually, my very last in-person presentation of 2020 was at the Local First Good Business Summit in, gosh, what was that? February? January? What is time, right? And I was supposed to be speaking all over the country this year. Obviously, that's not the case, but I'm so happy that I'm able to come online to you from the safety of our homes and talk about my favorite topic. So Jennifer, you've seen me before. Great. That was an awesome summit, wasn't it? It was just so uplifting and I learned a lot too. So very cool. My name is Quinn Tempest, if you haven't seen me present before. And yes, if you're wondering, that is my real name. I've been told that I sound like I could be Marvel's next superhero. Which I wish I could control the weather with the last name Tempest, because I would control the heat in the summer. But for now, my only superpowers are really digital strategy and graphic design. I do a lot of web design, branding, and holistic digital strategy. I'm also the founder of Create Your Purpose, which is really a movement and a community of entrepreneurs who want to build purpose-driven businesses. My background is in corporate America, so I used to be the director of marketing at a larger agency here in town. But now I really focus my efforts on working with small business owners and entrepreneurs, because really that's where my passion lies. Hi, Miriam. Miri from the Whiskey Porch and Arizona Artisans Collective. I do remember you. Thanks for coming back. I also live right here in downtown Phoenix, so I am calling in from my urban loft. right here in downtown, don't own a car, so I get around by walking and biking, which is a little bit warm, but I make do. So if you are on Instagram, which I hope all of you who are attending an Instagram presentation are, please give me a follow. I share lots of great tips on there. I'd love to hear what you think about this presentation and just keep our relationship going after this talk. So you can find me at quinn.tempest. So let's go ahead and dive in. So today I want to talk with you about a couple of things. First, I want to set the landscape for just how powerful Instagram is, and especially Instagram stories is, and then talk about how you can use some actionable tips that I'll talk about today to create a really effective story strategy. Does that sound good? Let me know in the chat. Let me know if you're excited. I saw a couple of you said you are. So let's go ahead and dive in first with a couple of numbers that really set the stage for just how powerful Instagram has been, is currently, and where it's going in 2020 and beyond. Now, the first number is 1 billion, and this is obviously a huge, spectacular number, and it is the number of total users on Instagram's platform as a whole. Now, I mainly bring this up to contrast it with the second number, which is 500 million. Now, this is half the amount of users on Instagram's platform as a whole that are using Instagram stories every single day. This is amazing. And I'll also be honest and say Instagram hasn't updated this statistic in over a year. So I bet it's way bigger than this. So there are really huge opportunities to reach your audience, whoever they are, because without a doubt, they are hanging out on the most popular social media platform right now, and the most popular part of a social media platform, stories. Don't get me started on TikTok. There's still a lot of drama going around on that, but that will be something that will be interesting to watch, especially with all the government discussions about it. Now, the third number I want to share with you is this. 1/3 of the most viewed stories on Instagram actually come from business accounts, from brands, from people like you, small business owners, entrepreneurs, founders, marketers. Not only are people looking at Kim Kardashian selfies or what their friends ate for lunch today, although they definitely are, they are actively engaging and interacting with brands. So that tells us that there are huge opportunities for us not to only find our target audience, but to nurture relationships that last us and give us a great ROI at the end of the day. So one of the biggest things about Instagram is that it's not that old. It's actually only about 4 years old. And I found this article in doing some research from August 2016 on TechCrunch. And I love it. It makes me laugh for 2 reasons. The first being that they called Instagram stories a Snapchatty feature, which is just like a funny word, Snapchatty feature. And then they also used on the bottom right here, a cat laser eye photo. I just thought it was really funny. But what's interesting here is that they really weren't sure what Instagram stories was all about 4 years ago. In fact, I didn't even latch onto it until I think 2017 in the spring. I remember having to ask a friend, what are stories? What are these circles up at the top of the app that seem to disappear after 24 hours? And she had to explain it to me, which is funny because it's full circle. 4 years later, I'm now teaching and do a lot of Instagram strategy work for clients. But it was a really new thing. And it was interesting because Snapchat was really the precursor to Instagram stories, to these disappearing videos, images, and things like that. But what's interesting about Snapchat is that within only 8 months of Instagram stories being released, it completely obliterated Snapchat's amount of daily users. Also today, everyone, is really interesting. If you saw the news or if you already follow me on the Instagram and you saw me share this, Instagram just released this new feature called Reels. I personally have not gotten it yet, so I'm super excited. But I see such parallels with what happened a couple of years ago, because Instagram stories is really like how Snapchat is, right? But because Instagram had such a user base, it completely obliterated their users because they wanted to use that type of technology on Instagram. Whereas Reels is basically a copy of TikTok. And with all of the government drama that's going on, and the fact that the Instagram Reels is a very similar video editor, I'm really, really curious to see if this ends up happening with TikTok and with Reels. So we'll see, but we've already seen this dynamic happen before. But really what happened with Snapchat was that they didn't capture the attention of us, of brands, of marketers, of business owners, really wanting to nurture a direct relationship with their audience. Snapchat was much more about teens and just sending fun little videos to friends. Now, I had a chance about, I think it was actually almost a year ago in August, because I remember it was very humid. I went to Arkansas to speak on Instagram marketing, and I had the amazing opportunity to interview an Instagram employee, which I was over the moon about. So here he is. His name was Matt Holman, and he was actually is a product designer on Instagram stories. And he said something that I guess didn't surprise me. It just kind of blew my mind to hear it. He said this: Instagram stories are the fastest growing tech product in the history of the world. Let that sink in for a second. Forget the printing press, forget even Facebook, forget Snapchat. No, really, can we? Instagram stories has far surpassed all of them in terms of adoption, popularity, and I'll argue that it's really helped Instagram become an absolute cultural phenomenon. Would you agree? Let me know in the chat. How many hours do you spend on Instagram a day? I'm going to type mine in real quick. 6.25 hours. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but that seems like how much time I spend on Instagram, because it's become such a part of my life, such a part of my business, and such a part of my day to day. Laura says 2. That's probably a little bit healthier than mine. Monica says 3 to 4. Jackie says 35 minutes time limit. Yeah, I'm actually more on your speed, Jackie. I think I might have set an hour time limit just because I use it for my business so much. And I like to use that little alert on my phone to say, okay, Quinn, calm down. You're on here too much. So Instagram is now a cultural phenomenon, and Instagram stories has been the thing that has cemented that. So what we need to all do is learn how to effectively create a strategy to engage our audience, our possible customers and clients every single day. So herein lies the problem. I work with a lot of clients, not just on their digital marketing strategy, but often on their Instagram strategy. And I come up against a lot of different objections. So if you won't mind to play along with me, I want to see which statements sound familiar to you or which ones you feel like you would say. So we're going to play a little. So in the chat, I'm going to give you 4 statements. I'm going to read them out. And in the chat, I want you to type which number or numbers sound like you. You could type 1, you could type 1, 2, you could type 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So here we go. Number 1, does this sound like you? I don't know where to even begin when it comes to Instagram stories. Is that you? Type number 1 in the chat and let me know. And there's no shame here. This is a safe space. Eva, Monica, Doug, Katie, 11111. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Number 2, type this in the chat. I don't have enough content ideas. I hear this a lot when people think, oh, well, how am I supposed to keep up with daily content that disappears when I don't even know what I'm supposed to be posting? Anyone feel number 2? Laura, Monica, Doug. Okay, I see a couple of repeats, which is totally fine, because really what's important here is to identify your baseline so we know how you can grow. Number 3, type it in the chat. I am consistent already, but I feel like no one's engaging. Do you feel like you're talking into a void? Do you feel like your audience isn't there? Is this something that rings true for you? Monica says yes. A little bit for Miriam. Okay, that's okay. It's all, you can have different scales of how this is. Jennifer says yes. Rachel says I get engagement from the same 2 people. Hey, You know, maybe I hope it's not just your mom and your dad, but if they are engaged, they're engaged. So you got to keep building on that. How about number 4? Type it in the chat. I just don't see the benefit of all the effort. It is a lot of effort to maintain stories, to push stories out. And if you're not seeing the ROI from it, it can feel tiring. So let me know, does this feel like you? OMG, yes. Okay. Way too much effort. Yep. Okay, so this is how we're gonna go about today. I wanna start to give you a few little tidbits to help you flip the script on these. I'm not gonna be able to change all of these statements in 45 minutes, but I wanna set you down to the path to shift your perspective and also just know how to better approach your strategy. So moving forward, I want you to start to say things like this. And I want you to take a second and breathe in the one that you want, okay? The one that you want the most. Number 1, I have a clear, intentional strategy. Number 2, I am overflowing with content ideas. Number 3, people love and engage with my content. And number 4, I am playing the long game like a pro. Let me know which one you want the most in the chat. Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? Is it strategy, content, engagement, or ROI? 1 and 4, Eva. Okay, Monica says number 1. Cool. So at the end of this, I'm going to give you these slides. So I want you to come back and just keep revisiting what your overarching objective is that you want to work on. And hey, you might not be able to work on all 4 of these right away, but you can work on one of them. So I want you to think about what would be my top priority and what's my objective that I really want to work on for the next, say, quarter on Instagram strategy. Thanks so much for tuning in to that little game. I always like to have fun with that. And I think it just helps you see where you are and where you want to go. And that's the transformation we want to do, is taking you from this feeling frazzled, overwhelmed, and just ready to give up to this, the queen, fierce, dominating, strategic, and determined. And please know that this transformation is possible in Instagram and Instagram story efforts. And I'm going to give you a few action items on how you can get there, how you can throw that hair around and have sparkles all around you. Okay, good. I like that you're liking this, Miriam and Evia. Awesome. All right, so how do you do this? How do you make the transformation? Well, first and foremost, we need to identify what strategy you are already implementing. I'm guessing that because you're here, you're already on Instagram stories. If not, that's okay. I'll touch on things that you can do too. But take a second and look at these 3 strategies and just identify which one you think you are. And then I'm going to go into each of them. The first one is this, a lazy strategy. The second one is a weak strategy. And the third one is a boring strategy. So I thought through all of the people I work with, all the entrepreneurs I coach, all of the clients I have, and I grouped all of the strategies that I see into these 3. So I see a couple of you already thinking that you might be 1 or 2. And so let me go into these a little bit more in depth to not only show you if you really are there, but to give you a remedy on how to fix your strategy and to make it more engaging. Hi, Jocelyn. I recognize that name. Thank you for being here. So here is number 1. It is a lazy strategy. So this is really when you treat Instagram stories like any other social media channel. And why I say that is because Instagram stories is a completely different beast than any other social media platform. Yet I see so many businesses, so many professional users of Instagram taking a strategy, say from Facebook or Twitter, and just taking that content and kind of repurposing it and dumping it onto Instagram stories. Or they take their feed content and all they do is reshare it on their stories. And there's really no life to it. There's really no interest. There's no engagement. And it's just lazy. The second aspect of a lazy strategy is just no strategy. So these really go hand in hand. So let's unpack 2 reasons why you might be implementing or not implementing a lazy strategy? And I saw you guys like my GIFs already, and yes, that is the right way to say it. So I'm gonna throw a couple more at you. The first one is Taylor Swift, because look at what she's looking at. What is she looking at? Anyone got a guess when she opens it up and sees the sparkles? She's looking at a shiny object. And that is what Instagram stories is for so many businesses trying to use Instagram. They just say, oh, there's a new part of the platform. I got to use it. And so let's just push some of the content we've got onto that format without actually sitting and thinking about how do I create content that is engaging for this specific part of the platform. I call this the social media, this is hard to say, the social media shiny object syndrome, where any new part of a platform comes out and you immediately jump to it without actually thinking through what you want to do. The second aspect is you just don't have a content marketing strategy in general. And here's what I'm going to tell you from years of experience managing holistic digital content strategies, is that Instagram should be an extension of your existing content marketing strategy. So it shouldn't just be standalone, it should be part of your holistic strategy. If you don't have one yet, then this is where you really need to start thinking through who is my audience, what are my major content pillars, and then you translate that to Instagram. So those are really the two biggest problems I see with lazy strategies, is just jumping in because there's a shiny object, or just not having an overarching strategy in general. So how do you fix a lazy strategy? What is the remedy, and what is your action item? So whenever you see a little lightning bolt today, this is your action item I want you to write down. But also, by the way, I'm going to give you the slides at the end of this, and I'm going to give you a worksheet so you can create a starter strategy for yourself if you haven't yet done that, okay? So don't worry too much about missing anything, because you're going to get all this at the end. So here's how to remedy a lazy strategy. It's just simple. Document a story-specific strategy. Think through what are the different content formats you can create, what's your schedule going to be like, what kind of regularly scheduled programming do you have, and don't worry, I've got a worksheet for you to do that. So I just want to preview this for you here. All right, so now let's turn our attention to number 2, the weak strategy. This one makes me really sad because there's a bit of strategic thought, it just falls flat. And this is because you usually totally miss the point why people love Instagram in the first place. And here's what it's all about. I can't remember who this woman is. Is this someone from Housewives? I think so. I should have looked that up. But I love this because she's like, it's not all about me. And this is really the problem with businesses implementing a weak strategy, is that they think it is. But that's a misunderstanding of content marketing, because the secret of content marketing is that it's not about you. It's about your audience. It's about delivering them useful, relevant information without selling or interrupting them. Yet so many brands on Instagram stories like to treat it like an ad channel. They like to talk about themselves a lot. They like to not create engagement or relationships with their audience, and they talk at their audience instead of with them. If that sounds familiar to you, let me know in the chat. I tend to come across this with some more corporate organizations or even small businesses who have more of a traditional media mindset, where they think they have to treat this part of the platform as like another ad channel. So if that's you, I mean, if you're in that environment, it can be a hard thing to change because it's a cultural thing, but it can be adjusted. And that's because you really need to root yourself in what Instagram marketing is at its core. So here is the definition. Instagram marketing is an interactive experience of your brand that is creatively presented and strategically planned in order to, and this is like stars and emphasis, build a relationship with your audience. It's not to sell them, it's not to interrupt them, it's to build a relationship. Obviously, the end goal is you want to sell them and you want to get them to hire you or buy from you, But the amazingness of Instagram and the thing that people are looking for is experiences, is connection, is meaning, is entertainment. And you have to figure out, well, how do those things come to life for my brand? And that's where a good brand strategist comes in. But so many people, so many companies just want to blaze right over the relationship part and just talk at their audience. So really, here's the remedy to a weak strategy. And I've already kind of mentioned it. You want to talk with your audience, not at them. You want to create engagement with them and a relationship. Now, one of the other things I'll share is that if you're really struggling with, what content should I create? I don't have enough content. I don't know what I should do that doesn't feel salesy. Then you need to broaden your brand. Almost treat your brand like a lifestyle and think about all of the peripheral complementary things that are part of your brand, but maybe not directly related. And let me paint a picture and give you an example of that so this will make more sense. So here's a client of mine. I don't know if any of you have been here before, but the McKinley Club is a beautiful co-working space in downtown Phoenix. Unfortunately, I haven't been there since the pandemic, but it's a beautiful space that I did their Instagram strategy. And so one of their challenges was, well, we're a co-working space. Like, how many things can we say about being a co-working space without always trying to sell people to come in the door and to try it out and become a member? And so really the opportunity here is to broaden their brand and to really see what other things can be included. So here's what we talked about when we created their content pillars. Well, one of the first things they can easily do is highlight their members. Not just say, come in and become a member, but highlight and showcase the people that work in the space by showing what they do, by showing who they are, and telling their story. They also have a ton of amazing programming, events to connect members, to educate members, and that's a whole other content pillar that they can fill for their Instagram stories. Also, they're right in the heart of downtown Phoenix, and they're an important part of the community. So they can share about the restaurants that are in walking distance or the events that are going on that people who are living in the area, working in the area would be interested in and would also discover them via that content. Also, they have a beautiful interior space. It's gorgeous. You can see in some of the photos of their feed here. And so we want to really highlight the beautiful interiors that they have, as well as lastly, just the idea of co-working and small businesses. So one of the things I did when I did their strategy for stories was to give them a calendar of those kind of social media days. So like Read a Book Day or Women Entrepreneur Day. And there's just so many days throughout the year that were perfectly relevant to entrepreneurship and small business ownership that they could create content out of that. So if you're struggling with a weak strategy, if you're struggling with just talking at your customers about your business or your product or your offering, broaden your brand and think about all of the tangential but complementary parts that can come into content. Hopefully I've gotten some of you to get your juices flowing here to think about how you can really broaden that circle of your content focus. Now, last but not least, there is a boring strategy. I hate these because you can clearly see that they've thought through a strategy, but they just don't know like the technical elements of how to make it interesting, which is really where content expertise and dynamo should really come in. So a boring strategy is when you've got a strategy, but people swipe away from it because it's just not engaging. And it's not the good kind of Tinder swipe. It's the swipe because I'm bored and I want to go to the next thing. So here's a couple examples of this. And I really love this GIF from Titanic. Because it explains what I see a lot with Instagram stories and a boring strategy. It's just so long. It's so cumbersome because these brands treat their Instagram stories like a feature film. Like there's no breaks. Oftentimes I see a lot of entrepreneurs like holding up their phone and just talking into their stories for like 10 different segments. And it's boring. It's not engaging. It's not interactive. And we're going to talk about how you can switch that. So you want to be thinking about this Titanic old lady. It's been 84 years since you started this Instagram story, and I just want to swipe away. That is not what you want. So really the remedy for a boring strategy is what we're going to unpack for the rest of this talk. And that is, you got to master the art of thumb stopping, story building, and engagement tactics. All right. So this is where we're going to get a little nitty gritty. We're going to talk about, well, now that you know what kind of strategy you have or you don't have, how do you really boost up what you are going to do or what you're doing already? And that is by engaging your audience, nurturing relationships, and delivering them value right on their phone every single day. So how are we doing, everyone? Pop it in the chat. What resonated with you so far? I'm going to get a sip of water and give you a second to let me know. And then we're going to get into some nitty gritty. I got to move my chat. It's a little bit on the side here, but I can't see my, oh gosh, let's see if I can move this. Oh, well, I can see like half of what this question is. It says, Quinn, will you differentiate between something and stories? I'm guessing that's the feed and stories. Let me know if that's right. Yes, the feed. Thank you, Miriam. Yeah, so the feed, I want you to think in terms of evergreen content. So the feed lives there forever, right? Unless you archive things or take things down. And so you really want to have content that is search friendly. So you've got your hashtags that are targeted towards your target audience, and they can really discover you through your feed content. So your feed content is usually a little bit more polished. It's a little bit more put together, and it's really geared towards discovery. Also, your feed content really plays into the overall look of your profile, which is increasingly important because 2/3 of people who visit your profile, it's their first time going there. And you only have milliseconds to grab their attention and to get them to say, hey, this brand looks like it's worth the follow. The story content, it's less about discovery because it's going to be more for your existing audience. Now, obviously, there are opportunities to be found through stories, but for the most part, it's going to be to nurture the relationships with your audience. It's going to feel more raw in the moment. That doesn't mean it's not planned. That doesn't mean it's not strategic, but that's really the differentiation. The feed is evergreen and really geared for discovery and more polished, whereas stories should be ongoing, nurturing, a little bit more real and in the moment. They can play and interplay with one another. So oftentimes I will take a feed post for myself or for my clients, and I'll teach them how to repurpose that into stories. So say I posted, a little image, well, I'll take some of that caption and I'll break it out into 4 or 5 different segments on stories, because maybe people didn't see it on the feed, or maybe I can make it more interesting on stories. So don't worry about making them completely siloed. They should have an interplay with one another, especially if you can do that with repurposing. So I'll come back to some more questions at the end, so keep those coming, and I'll check my time here. So we're gonna get into how to create engaging stories. So you kind of have your strategy down, you know what's not working. So how do you keep people's attention as you go and create your stories? Well, the first thing is you need to build a narrative over segments. So before I go into this one, I want to break down the terminology of what I mean. So here is, say, a story sequence. Now, the sum of all of the individual content formats like videos, boomerangs, all of that, that is your story. Multiple content segments make up your story. Now, here's where some of the confusion comes into play, and I have this on authority from the Instagram employee that I interviewed. The individual segments are called just that. They are called segments. They're not called slides. They're not called stories. They're called segments. So one individual piece of content is a segment, and a story is all of the segments, okay? And why that's important is because you really want to think through what the connecting thread is between all of the segments that make up your story, especially when it comes to creating something more curated, less off the cuff. And we'll talk about why there are differences between that. So here's what you need to do. You need to know your through line. So this is basically like, what's your thesis statement? Why are you posting on stories? I see so many brands and so many entrepreneurs and small business owners just do random stories. And there is an absolute benefit to that if you are just doing kind of day in the life content. I did that today, but I pre-planned that. I said, okay, Quinn, on Wednesday, it's just day in the life content. But yesterday, I had a pre-planned story that was curated, it was well thought out, and it was planned in advance. And that ups the quality of your story content. And as you'll learn, that retains engagement. So if you're putting together a curated story, know your through line, know your point, know your thesis, and then follow that through all of the segments. At the end of this presentation, I will give you access to this worksheet. It is a planning worksheet. I give you an example of how I do it and how I teach it, and then you can start to storyboard out your content to think through it more intentionally. The second part of this is to mix up content formats. So remember our Titanic lady? Whereas in these really kind of weak and boring strategies, they seem to just be feature films where it's almost like a long continuous video or just a bunch of photos. There's not too much thought into it. I want you to stop treating your stories like a feature film and start treating it like a PowerPoint. Like Michael Scott here says, a PowerPoint, or even think of it like a PowerPoint party, you know, where people get together, they present on a quick topic, really easy, fun, interactive, engaging. That's what you want your stories to feel like. You don't want it to feel like a 3-hour-long movie. You want it to feel like a quick PowerPoint that builds your narrative over segments. Even look at what I'm doing here. I've built my transitions and my points as I'm talking to keep you engaged, which I hopefully am doing. So let me give you an example of how this actually works. This is a series I do every week called Tip Tuesday on my own profile. It's a really engaging thing that people love, and I curate these in advance. So first, there's a cover video. So I tell them, here's what you're gonna learn. And then I give them a talking head video. So that's just me talking to the camera. And you always, of course, want to include text because a lot of people, me included, don't listen to stories. They read stories. So even if it's a video, you want to make sure that there is text for both hearing impaired and for people who don't have their sound on. The next format was an interactive poll. So immediately I draw my audience in. I ask them questions. I get them not just engaging in terms of watching, but interacting directly with my content, which is the biggest difference of Instagram stories compared to every other platform. This is where you can directly engage and interact with your audience. So take advantage of it. Then the next three, as you can see, I've got a text, I got another talking head, and then I've got a text. So you want to mix up the formats to keep people's attention going. And obviously you can see here, I have a very specific aesthetic and color palette. So the more of a visual strategy you have that matches your brand, the more people will stay and pay attention. And I really think the interactivity here is where most brands miss. So that third poll there, that's really, really important, is draw your audience in as much as you can. And that's really the third point here, is to get them interacting with your content. Instagram gives us amazing toolbox to do this with. So use the interactive stickers on your stories. There's polls like this one, which was amazing because I was able to get great feedback that told me my audience was spending more time on stories than the feed. So I was able to make a strategic decision to spend more of my time focusing on the part of the platform they were hanging out on. And my ROI has gotten way better by just showing up there consistently. There's the question one that I think is great as well, which you can repost. There's the slider, which kind of gauges sentiment. There's quiz. And now there's a new one where people can directly DM you from a sticker. So don't forget about these. Use this in your narrative and use it to break up your stories into that PowerPoint feel. by directly engaging your audience. And you want to get creative here too. I don't think you necessarily need a lot of third-party apps to create stories. Instagram has spent a lot of time at building new features into the native editor. So have some fun with what they've given you. Even within the create part of the app, there's a ton of different templates that you can pick from. If you're not really sure on how you want to approach it, they give you some really good things to start with. So have fun. Instagram just released new fonts this week. There's just so many different opportunities to create interesting content right on the app. And then if you want some third-party ones, I do have a blog on that on my site if you want to get a little more creative. Now, the last tip before we were going to really break down the end is to take a page from television. So what does TV do well? I know you're not in the room, but if you're on the chat, take a guess. What does TV do really well to engage you? Let me know. Does anyone have an answer? Not much, LOL, Miriam. Okay, what about Netflix? Anyone else? Any thoughts of what TV does to draw you in? Miriam, a good story, of course. That is 100% part of it too. They encourage binge watching. Yep. Well, here's really the answer. It's that they have regularly scheduled programming. This is going to be more for traditional TV versus Netflix, where you get the whole season at once. But this is really like, think about Friends back in the day. It was a huge event, 7 o'clock on Mondays or whatever days, I can't remember, to go back and see the next episode, to see how were Ross and Rachel going to get together. And then you knew, okay, there's going to be another thing next week, so I'm going to come back. So this is what you want to approach your Instagram stories with, is regularly scheduled programming that doesn't just get people anticipating your content, but it gets them to engage with it even more. And this is something I encourage all of my clients to do, all of my women in my community I run, and I do myself. I do this through my Tip Tuesday series that I already kind of shared with you. And so I do a story every week that's highly curated. And now I have become almost known for this series. I have people reach out to me saying, I'm so thankful that you're educating me all the time. I have had members in my community pay me because they said I got so much value from Tip Tuesday that I know I want to be in your program. So the more you can do regularly scheduled programming and do it in a way that fits your brand. For me, I'm an educator, so I teach. But I have other clients that do like McKinley Club. They showcase a different member for Member Mondays. You don't always have to do a daily thing or a weekly thing, but think about one thing that you can repeat and use that on your stories every week, every month, however is good for your frequency. A cool thing too that I do, and I encourage you to think about, is repurpose that content. So for me, I save that story every single week, and then I upload it to my IGTV. So that way it then becomes an evergreen piece of content that is on IGTV, and then I have it on my feed as well. So it hits people in multiple places, and I only had to create the content once, okay? So think about it. If you have an idea in the chat of what you can do with a regularly scheduled program, pop it in there. I'd love to know and maybe give you some feedback. All right, so let's break this down, and then I will open it up to your questions. So we have talked about the 3 different types of strategies that are problematic: a lazy, a weak, and just a boring strategy. Then I gave you some nitty-gritty tactics on how to create interesting dynamic stories. So now let's break down and bring all of those things together into the anatomy of thumb-stopping stories and a thumb-stopping story strategy. So there are 6 things I want you to think about. First is that overarching strategy. If you don't have that yet, I've got a worksheet for you, so that's coming. But you make sure you need to have a story-specific strategy, because everything else I'm going to share with you on this list is informed by what you do in that strategy. Now let's take it down to the story-specific level. You have to have a through line. You have to know what the point of your story is. not just the point of all your stories, that's the strategy, but the point of the individual story that you're curating so that people understand what they're getting and that there's a thesis to it. Also need to introduce people to what you're going to be sharing. I see a lot of brands just jump into something, and because of the attention span and just the format itself, you really need to give people a second to say, okay, what are we talking about right now? If it's a clothing company, say, we can't wait to share with you our hot summer picks for exercise outfits or whatever. And that's the intro. And then they go into the next piece, which is the meat. This is the meat of your content. This is where you share the content that supports your through line. This is where you throw in different formats like boomerang, video, text, interactivity. You want to make sure to include that. I think that is the key to really engaging stories, is to make sure you are drawing your audience in. And of course, lastly, there's usually some kind of call to action. Now, that doesn't mean it's a sales call to action. It could be simply like, let us know what you think, or, give me your feedback, or just DM me. There should be some kind of interaction, or just say, hang out and watch for the giveaway next week. There's lots of ways to, once you grab people's attention, to make sure that they know what to look for next. So really, this is the anatomy. It starts with strategy. It moves through having an intention for your story, and then bringing it to life through the content. Now, I know this was a ton of information, and I promised you this worksheet throughout. So you can go to this link, bit.ly/localfirst2020. And at that link, you will find both the slides that you're looking at right now, so you can review everything I talked about. You'll also get the starter strategy workbook. So this is a really great way, if you do not have an Instagram story specific strategy yet, to sit down with your team, or if you're on your own, to just print it out and work through thinking about the questions that are in the book. I'm going to ask you things like, what's your content ethos? Who's your target audience? And I'll give you opportunities to circle different formats that you are able to create, like video, boomerang, things like that. So if this is all a lot for you, start there. And then if you are a little further along, go back to these slides, go back to the nitty-gritty stuff that I shared, and really focus on curating content for stories in this engaging manner. And remember, not all of your stories need to be curated. You can do day in the life. You can post a photo here and there. But when you're really wanting to elevate your content, elevate your strategy, and also reduce the amount of time that you spend creating content, follow these principles. I've done it for myself. I've gone down to creating an hour and a half's worth of feed content on Mondays. And then throughout the week, I'll check in for about 30 minutes a day to maintain comments and DMs, and repurpose my feed content into engaging, thumb-stopping stories. All right, so if there are any questions, I'll go ahead and take now. So pop them in the chat if you have specifics for things that you're going through, or more general 101 questions. I am all ears, and I will answer them for you. Make sure you get this link, because I'm going to actually stop my screen share so that I can come on full screen. So just make sure you go to bit.ly/localfirst2020, and I know Melissa will also send them out at the end. So let me stop sharing here, and I will come back on. Okay, so Monica says she got to run. All right, Jillian, any tips on B2B? Yes. My biggest tip for B2B is believe that you can be on Instagram and know that it can be successful for you. I think the biggest frustration I have with B2B people or brands on Instagram is that A, they just don't do it. They just think, oh, it's Instagram, it won't work for me. And B, they don't broaden their brand enough to make their brand interesting on Instagram. So I would definitely recommend that, Jillian, is to think about how you can create what is the, and I know this sounds weird when I talk about a B2B, but like, what is the lifestyle around your brand, And I'm trying to think of specific examples, but I can always send them to you after. But you definitely want to know, like, what is your goal when it comes to using Instagram for B2B? I've worked with certain clients that really just want to use it for recruiting. So they want to show their company culture. And that is a completely different strategy than trying to nurture relationships with their target audience. So really get clear on your goal. But I will tell you, all of the principles that I've shared today apply. Regularly scheduled programming, having clear content pillars, and also making sure for everyone, B2B or not, to keep moving your audience off the platform as much as possible. And when I say that, what I mean is that you want to make sure that you're creating content bridges, because you do not own your audience on Instagram. Mark Zuckerberg does, right? And he's got plenty to work with. He don't need any more. So you want to look at opportunities to use content marketing to offer downloads, like for B2B, white paper could be amazing. And get people who are following you to join your email list, because then you can really own that relationship. We didn't touch on that today, but that is how Instagram becomes part of your holistic digital marketing strategy, is use it to cast the wide net and then draw those people into the net, into your email list. Rachel says, where do sticky stories play into stories and IGTV? I totally got what you meant. So Rachel is referencing the highlights. So this is something that you definitely want to think through when it comes to your story strategy, is what do you save on your profile? If some of you don't know what I'm talking about, highlights are stories that you can save indefinitely and they show up on your profile. Whereas most stories disappear, well, all stories disappear within 24 hours, but there are some that you can save. And so what you need to do, Rachel, is decide what's important to have on your profile. And that's going to depend on different types of businesses. For me, I save my Tip Tuesday every single week. So I have a static highlight that says Tip Tuesday. Every week I update it with my news story, so people know where to find it. I also do a monthly reflection ritual on my Instagram, because a lot of my focus is on purposeful marketing. So I help people really reflect. And so I have those templates saved there. I think I also have like an introduction story saved. With other clients I've worked with, it's similar things. If you have regularly scheduled programming there, with Henley Club, we saved the tour there. So they did a really great curated story that was a tour of their space and what members get. That gets saved there. Whereas I've had other like B2C retail clients save FAQs around shopping. So you really just want to think, well, what do I need my audience to access? And also think of it in terms of a landing page, because your profile is the sum of your bio, your highlights, your image, as well as your feed content. So you want to think, well, what do I need my audience to see? Or what do I need my new followers to discover when they come to my profile? So I hope that helps, Rachel, because you really want to think through that. The problem I find is most businesses don't think through that. And then their stories become like these 100 segment long things that they just keep adding to, but it was added to 3 years ago, and it just becomes a mess. So a lot of times when I do Instagram strategy work, I will audit what they already have. And for the most part, I just say, get rid of all of your stories and let's start over. And you want to make sure that it looks good too. Doug, hi Doug. He said, this is all new to me. I'm a general contractor and I'm looking at using social media to expand our business of remodeling and building homes. Oh my gosh, you have so many content opportunities. I'm still not sure how to use IG stories to do that. Do you have an IG for Dummies webinar coming up? I don't, but I know Local First, I've done those for Local First before, so they might have some old recordings, but if not, my site has a ton of content for that. But I want to just say, Doug, you are in a visual field, so you have so many opportunities. And I think this is really the trick to Instagram stories, is looking at your work and looking at every moment as a content opportunity. For you, if I was a strategist, I would say, You have so many opportunities to show the home building and renovation process as it's going along. You can do that as a story. Say, okay, we've got this bathroom, and then you can break that into stages. You could do, here's how we put together our plan. You can show, I don't know if you do renderings or things like that, but one story could be like, here's how we put together our bathroom plan. And then you can like actually show you doing the renovations, which I think that would come across visually really well with like videos, boomerangs, fun stuff. And then everyone on stories loves before and after. So people tap through those all of the time. So before, after is amazing. And that could become almost a series for you. If you have really good shots already, just make that into like a weekly, you know, before, after reno or something. So there's so many opportunities. And what I recommend, Doug, is thinking through your content pillars first. So when I say that, I mean your categories of topics. So usually it's like 3 to 5 is good. I'll give you an example to make this real. For my own business, I have entrepreneurship is one of my pillars. So I talk about what it's like to be an entrepreneur. Digital marketing is another one. So I teach people how to do it. Purpose is my third one. So how do you do it all intentionally? And then systems is my fourth one, because people really struggle with how do I create a system to create my purpose and to build my platform. So those are my 4, I think, different pillars. So all of my content foots back to those things. Of course, I include some fun things because I'm a personal brand. So I get to include the fact that I ride bikes and I live in a cool loft and all of these things. But Doug, I would start there. Just think through your 4 or 5 different things. It could be renovation. It could be planning. It could be, you know, whatever works for you. And that will help guide you. And I definitely recommend the worksheet. I think that's the best starter for dummies, although you're not a dummy. All right, Miriam said, it seems like a work for something that appears in 24 hours, LOL, especially if it takes a lot of time to put together. Yep, yeah, it is. So you need to decide, is Instagram stories a really important marketing channel for you? If you're here, I'm guessing you already think it could be, maybe because you're consuming a lot of content there and you enjoy it. So if it's worth it, you have to just play the long game. And if you start to create some processes around these things and get education like you're already doing today, it does become easier and quicker over time. The people in the brands I see spending too much time and not getting an effort is because they don't have a strategy. It's because they don't know what they're doing. And so they just throw things at it and see what sticks. And that's no way to go about Instagram stories. So what I recommend is setting some boundaries. I don't know if it was Miriam, you said you had a time limit on your phone. Similar to that, say, okay, I'm going to spend 1 hour a week planning out my content for stories. And then I'm going to give myself 30 minutes a day just to play around at first. It's going to take you longer in the beginning, but the more you do it and the more you learn how to structure a story like we're talking about, the less time it takes, I promise. But you do have to build that muscle, and you do have to have fun with it too. So I think it's definitely worth it. And for me, I'll just give you some insight. I do 1 curated story a week. That's my tip Tuesday. The rest of it is a little bit more day in the life because that works for my brand. Whereas I have other clients, I tell them, you know, more corporate or small business owners, I'm like, okay, you want to do 2 curated stories a week, maybe do 1 monthly roundup, and then like fill it in with some other fun stuff. So it doesn't need to be super planned out and super thought out every single time, but it should have these principles applied. Doug, yes, anything on stories disappears in 24 hours. So unless you save it on your highlights. So that's why you want to keep it a little bit more rough, a little bit more in the moment versus the feed that's a lot more evergreen. Katie, our organization has a lot of engagement on Facebook. Can IG story content be efficiently repurposed for Facebook? Yes, if you're good at repurposing. But I will say, don't just take the Facebook stuff and dump it to stories. you really want to turn that into something a little bit interesting. If you want to email me, Katie, I'll give you a link to a video. I filmed a video like a month ago about how I repurpose content, and it talks about how I take one piece of content and explode it into like 30, including stories. So you'll want to really outline, how am I going to take this one thing from Facebook and then turn it into about like 8 segments on stories. It's really pretty easy. Sometimes I even just do that with the caption. I'll just break up the caption and do 3 or 4 segments. I'll pop an image. So you want to use these principles of mixing up content formats and building the narrative. Just explode it out into a few more pieces of content for stories. Okay, well, let me just get it right now because you guys want this video. So I have the link. It's on my website. So I think it's how I repurpose content. Yeah. Okay, so this video will show you how I do it. It's just like a quick personal example. So I just popped it in the chat. I think it's like 9 minutes. It will kind of show you how I do repurposing in general, and then how I turn things into Instagram stories. But really, that's what I do. Like, I take 1 email a week. I turn that into about 4 or 5 feed posts, and then turn those into a couple of Instagram stories. So you don't need to create brand new content all the time. Regardless if it's stories or Facebook, take one thing and explode it out. You just need to learn how to apply the principles for the different platforms. Yeah. Cool. Well, it is 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and end here. But as I mentioned, here's my email. If you guys have questions, I'm all ears. Also, I am on Instagram, obviously way too much. So I will also give you the link so you can follow and DM me there. I practice what I preach. So if you want to watch my stories, you'll get a good feel. Today is more a day in the life, whereas yesterday was very curated, but you'll get a good idea. So thank you so much, everyone. Download that worksheet to help you out. Ask me any questions. And thank you to Local First for inviting me, but also just putting on a really great educational series with all women, yay, for the past couple of months. I just feel really grateful to be a part. So thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Quinn. That was really informative. And we will make sure to get that up on our website by the end of the week, and then send an email with the links and the video out as well.